I bet you know this, but AI search cites sources. That puts PR back in the spotlight. Today, Dan Nestle and I break down simple moves any brand can use to earn mentions, build authority, and get linked in AI answers. If you want AI to point to you, this is the episode of Strategy Talks you can't miss. Stay tuned. I'll be right back.
Let's strategize together. Let's hear it from an expert. Join the conversation, it's informative and free. You and me, let's talk some strategy. Now here's your host, Morin-van.
Hello, everyone. I am back with another episode of Strategy Talks. I'm so glad you're here with us today. If you're here live, whether it's on Facebook, on LinkedIn, or on YouTube, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Now, if you're watching this episode on the replay, I'd love to know that you are watching it. So put hashtag replay in the comments, especially if you have a question for myself or my guest. Last but not least, before we get started, I want to make sure that the podcast listener are welcomed as well. We know that many of you listen to Strategy Talks as a podcast and want to make sure that you know that we know that you are there. So without much further ado, today's guest, Dan Nestle, is here, and we're going to talk about PR strategies to rank in AI search. How are you today, Dan?
Hi, Doreen. It's great to be here. I'm so happy to kind of, after that incredible theme song, which I sadly admit that I hadn't heard before. I was like, oh, I feel very Mr. Rogersy. I feel like we're in a neighborhood together. That, I'm ready to kind of bring everybody into this whole PR comms world, and we all have this love of one another, which is really typically not my MO, but it's great. I'm loving it.
It is awesome. Yeah, actually, my son composed it, sang it, recorded it. And we were just talking about it this morning, and he's like, do you want me to re-record it, Mom? And I'm like, no, I actually like the way it is. It is familiar. It's on every single episode, and we're on episode 140 something. So it's been out there quite a bit, and I love it. I think it does,
catchy.
It's catchy, and it makes the show what it is. So Dan, let's dive right in. So what has changed in search this year or since AI really jumped in 24, 25? That should make every marketer and business owner care about PR. And I want to say again, but we should all be caring about PR all the time. So I don't want to use that word, but why should we care? Why should we care?
Well, do you want to be visible? I mean, do you want to be seen? Do you want a profile? Do you want your brand to be noticed? The fact is, like, when you ask what's changed, I mean, everything has changed in a way. And even as we speak, you're seeing studies come out about how people are leaving Google behind and leaving traditional search behind. It's funny we say traditional, but, but it has been around for 30 years, and they're leaving it behind to kind of rely more and more on their AI buddy. And that it's a sea change in the way that we've traditionally thought about being found and being discovered. How do we get in front of our audience is primary to communicators and marketers. How do we get in front of them? How do we convince them to stick around? And it's always been, okay, well, you need to get ranked. You need to get in search. And for most companies and for most people, especially individuals, that's been out of the question, right? SEO, getting on the search, on the SERPs in the first 2 pages, 20 years ago, they'd tell you this is what you need to do. You got to do this, but H1s and the meta tags and, all that stuff. But it became pretty evident soon that the big guys and the big companies were dominating, and there's no way to really break into that. So we started talking about long tail and just do these, there's still workarounds. And then after a while, I think people just realized, look, if I do good content and I just keep at it, people who need to find me will find me. But I'm not going to put all of my eggs into the search basket and, left it on to the brands, to big brands to do that. And now I think we're in a very different world. So now I think that we all have a chance. And we all have a chance not because of the technology and not because of, some fixes and upgrades that you need to do to your websites, et cetera, although there is some stuff you should do. But because we all have natural language capabilities innately as a human that put us on the same footing as anybody who puts content on the web. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's what AI brings to the table for search, or, for GEO, as we call it, generative engine optimization. I hate saying it.
I know. I didn't want to use that word. Actually, I was playing around with the description, the title of this live. And I was like, if I use GEO, people are going to not understand. And because I think there's such a learning curve still there.
Yeah. And I think it's important, though, that we say GEO, generative engine optimization, because when this transcript goes out there, it is going to say GEO in the transcript, and AI might like that. So let's put that out there, but we can just call it AI search from now on, and make it fairly, kind of level setted, and people can understand what we're talking about. But yeah, it's nuts because first of all, we don't know enough about it to make proclamations, despite the proclamations that you're hearing. But as you said, it's a huge opportunity for PR people and for communications people to really demonstrate value, which has been a struggle, I think, in our profession for as long as we've had a profession.
Yeah. So how does that really work then? So,
yeah.
It's leveled kind of the playing field, as you said, right? Because the big players who were paying, their traffic is down. Unless you've lived under a rock, you probably have seen that. People saying that, even the big brands are getting less traffic because people aren't going to Google to find them. They're talking into Chat GPT on their phone, or they're going to GPT and they're asking, and then it's not just what they're asking, it's how they're asking, correct? Right. People are using AI, generative AI, different than they would be using Google. Is that correct?
That's what one would hope, because if you're using it like you use Google, it's kind of a waste. Although Perplexity does have its kind of benefits in that respect. But let me just also say, before we go into all of it, is that we're not discounting search and Google, right? Because when you're further down in the intent, in your journey, your customer journey, and you already know who you're looking for, what you're looking for, you have a brand in mind, you're probably going to go to Google before anything else, unless you're going to AI to do some due diligence, in which case you're already in that brand's kind of orbit anyway. So for branded search, for intent-based brand search, where I want to know something about Doreen Morin, I'm going to search for her on LinkedIn, or I'll probably search for you on LinkedIn first. See, that was a little slip, but that's what I do. But I'll search for you on Google first, or, before I go to AI and start looking for things. But back it up, and you're like, if you are a typical consumer of media, or a consumer of content, or just a consumer, you're going to AI, you're using AI in new ways that, you're evolving, you're getting used to it, you're getting friendly with it. So you're starting to trust it and say, okay, look, I want to buy a computer and I want to upgrade my system. Here's what I got. What should I do? And which is a completely different approach to what are the best computers for me today, which you might do on Google. And now I'm speaking about this from experience, because, I've done this several times, not to upgrade my PC, but like I want to do different interesting things that I wasn't necessarily ready to spend money on. But I said, what can I do? And I went over to ChatGPT and I said, okay, here's my situation. Went to Perplexity, here's my situation. You compare and contrast, and you get incredible advice that is peppered with the brands and the kind of solutions that you might eventually want to buy to solve your problem. And that is a new thing.
Right. And
that whole experience a new thing.
I want to put a caveat in there. AI, generative AI doesn't always search the latest links.
Correct.
So if you're looking for the best sale, you might still want to hop over to Google. Once you get your answer from AI and said, this is the system I want to buy, you do probably want to drop that in Google and say, what's going on right now? Is there a sale right now? And that's from my
100%.
experience, is that you do that research on one spot, but they don't always have the best. So I try to do that with airline buying, like a ticket, and I got the best routes and stuff, but it couldn't pull up any of the best pricing. So I went back to Google with specific parameters of this is what I'm looking for. And then it did give me some stuff. So that's an interesting way to use both, right? So if I'm a small brand, maybe with a very small budget or maybe no PR budget, are there any moves that I can make this month to get quoted or mentioned? Because that's really what we're talking about, right? Getting mentioned by other people so AI can cite you.
So let me disabuse the audience a little bit about what a mention is and what the power of that is.
Sure.
And I'm going to step on some PR toes here too, because, as a 25-year, corporate communications and agency guy who has, I've seen all parts of communications, including PR. I've always thought that the media relations side of things, like, hey, let's work our asses off and get a pitch and get our names mentioned in, pick your poison, some top tier journal or newspaper or back then, or, website or whatever. There's a lot of effort that goes into a potential reward that is, in my mind now, worthless. Unless you are already a Fortune 100 company or something, and you need to have constant presence in the papers of record, the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, et cetera, where your investors are looking for you, right? For most of us, for the vast majority, and the 99-point-something% of businesses out there that are small businesses, this is not a reality that we should even be considering. Instead, we're looking at the power of earned media, and you mentioned, how can we get a mention, or how can we get picked up by the media? There's two things I want to say about that. The first one is, media relations does have its perks there, where you just build relationships with journalists and with people that are writing or are podcasting, and you talk about things, and hopefully you get quoted when they recognize that, oh, I know the expert in this particular field. So there's a kind of relationship that has to happen there so that you're top of mind when the writer, journalist, et cetera, is doing something about your topic, writing about, marketing. Okay, Doreen might be free. Let me reach out to Doreen. That's where you want to be. But that again takes a long time, and doesn't necessarily take investment. It just takes directed energy, and the right kind of contacts, which you don't necessarily have. So, what you can do now, what brands and what smaller companies, especially, and individuals who are building a personal brand should be doing, is building out your own content on a day-to-day basis, making sure that you are consistent in what you're putting out there in the world and have a point of view. Don't be generic and don't be neutral. I'm not talking about politics. I'm talking about your business. And be thorough with what you're saying and start putting out content. That is an effort for sure, but it doesn't need to cost what it used to cost, because ta-da, you have AI to help you if you do it right. So once you start doing that, at the same time, you're getting in front of more people. You are reaching out to the audiences that care about you, but you're also getting the attention of journalists and of people who are writing. So that's sort of an organic way to get attention. But if you want to be more directed, you want to say, look, I got this great story and I need to be I need to publicize it. Start talking to podcasters. start talking to podcasters, go on Substack, find, do a search for people on Substack that are writing the things that you care about. Follow them, subscribe to them, get yourself in their orbit, and look for the opportunity to make a comment on what they're doing. So commenting on other people's work, being on podcasts, go on LinkedIn, comment on LinkedIn. Like, get in there to the experts and the journalists that you want to be in front of and just start commenting and get yourself known a little bit in their worlds. And that, that builds these kind of credibility connections and slowly builds authority that, the media and that journalists, et cetera, are looking for. So I don't know if that's like, what it's going to yield results right away, right? But this is very important. The other thing I want to say is the value of the mention. So PR folks over the decades have been judged by media mentions. And media mentions is always, you see that in your quarterly business reports, et cetera. And marketers oftentimes look at that as, okay, what are our PR people doing? How many mentions did we get? Mentions, and I'm going to put this out there, are nonsense. Mentions are BS. I don't know if this is a family show, so I'm just going to say.
No, you can say it. You can say it. I'm going to not interrupt you and let you finish, but man, this is crazy.
Well, and I'll tell you why, because it's a fleeting moment and you won't remember anything. If you're in the audience and you see a CEO quoted, or you see a consultant quoted in an article that you choose to read for some reason, which, by the way, doesn't usually happen, what are the odds that you're going to remember that person's name the next day or 2 days later? You might pull that quote. If it's really great, you might pull that quote, be ambitious and play with it, but that's odd. That rarely happens. But if you're mentioned constantly and consistently, then you might have the beginnings of attention building, of earning attention of your audiences. What you really want is not a mention. You want a story. You want your whole beginning, middle, and end to be in front of the audience, because they'll remember that a lot more than they'll remember your mention. So, from a PR standpoint, that means being interviewed. It means doing Q&As. It means, it means being on podcasts, especially. I mean, podcasts are such a gold mine. And those kinds of deep, context-rich mentions, as it were, are far more valuable than the media hit high that you're going to get from seeing your name in the Times. So don't go for mentions, go for quality.
Well, it's interesting because, I'm a social media strategist, and I have worked with, 15 years, quite a few clients. And sometimes I'm pulled in onto a team that's already doing work. And several times I've been pulled onto a team where they were actively working with the PR team, trying to get their mentions up. Yeah. And I have seen what you described. The mentions were there. They were mentioned. How many mentions do we have? But nothing concrete ever came out of it versus, doing social media, being visible 5-6 days a week and being engaged is what got them partnerships, relationships, collabs, potential work. So I never want to say that out loud, because I don't want to be like, oh, PR is a waste of time, but I think it's a different way of looking at it. And now that I have done, I'm in year 4 of my podcast, and it's a video podcast. Initially, I called it a podcast. I called it a live show. And then podcasting was like an afterthought. And now it's a video podcast with, video. There's still things I can do to be seen more and honing in. We were just talking in the green room where, one of my recent episodes was about AI in higher education. I know this is going to hit home to people. So I'm even this far in, I'm honing into what people want to know about, what people want to learn about. So getting the right people on the podcast to talk about, this is going to be great for you. It's going to be great for me. It's going to be great for you. So this synergy is really what you want. And if you're looking to get onto podcast? Dan, do you have any advice for that? I know this is not a question on my menu here, but
no, it's fine. Like this is all important, right? It's all related.
yeah.
You know, I'm saying you need to get, you know, getting on podcasts is a great way to get mentioned and to get, but with the context that portrays you as the expert with the knowledge that you have. That is what AI is looking for. It's looking for the context. It's looking for validation of your credibility and your authority, so that when you do result in some sort of AI answer, that you know it reflects positively on the AI, for lack of it. Like, I like to have to anthropomorphize it a little bit, but yeah, getting on podcasts should be one of the core activities of, if you have a PR department, of your PR department. If you don't have a PR department, there are plenty of services out there that will help you for, you know, pennies a month or dollars a month. I don't necessarily love them, right? There's things like Podpitch and so on, but they work. So for those of you who don't know what these are, you sign up for let's say you have a point of view, you have some kind of a story that you want to tell, you have a business that you want to talk about. You sign up with a podcast pitching, what would you call it?
Service.
A podcast
Like
pitching
service.
tool or something? Service? Yeah, service. And, you know, a lot of it's AI generated, you know, so you put yourself in there, you put yourself in the mix, and they start to send out pitches to podcasters on your behalf. You might not, and you very likely won't, get on Joe Rogan or on Doreen Moran.
Really?
You know, you won't get on these top tier shows immediately. You might, depends on what you got to say. You never know. But in your industry, in your vertical, I can almost guarantee that there are more podcasters, more people who want to do podcasts, who are doing video, than you could possibly count or imagine. And there's more and more every day. Don't be too concerned about the audience size of the podcast you're going to be on. Don't be too concerned about, you know, their ranking in the podcast rankings. It's not important. What's important is when you get on a show, you get the assets. When you get on a show, you have an episode, 30 minutes, an hour, whatever it is, of you talking, of you making your points. You get the transcript, you get the video, you get the audio. That becomes more important and more critical than whatever number of listens that episode had gotten.
You just said something. I send all of my guests the full video file. I sent them the clips. I sent them an image. I've never sent anybody a transcript. Now, I can add that to my list. Another interesting thing is that I just saw a colleague of mine restart a podcast that they'd had for a while. And they're now offering both a free version to sign up, but you'll be in the back of the line, or you can purchase a spot to get in the line earlier. Is that where we're going to?
Oh,
to
you mean pay for play podcasts?
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's got to make a buck, I suppose. I've heard of that before. I know that there are some podcasts especially in professional organizations and industries that are associated with publishers that often do that. They charge guests to be on the show. I personally don't like the ethics of it. Not really, for me anyway. It's not really my jam. If the hosts are very transparent about it, basically saying, okay, you're about to witness an infomercial, that's okay. But yeah, I'm not saying don't do that, right? If you find a show that you really want to be on, you know it's the right thing, you know, then make your strategic decision. Is it right with your strategy? Do you know what you're getting into? Do you know the value for what you're paying? The things that you would ask of any advertising campaign, for example. Do the same thing with that podcast. The benefit of it, right? It would have to outweigh the cost. But remember, the benefit of being on any podcast with a host that knows somewhat what they're doing And that's one thing I would say is just make sure the host is somebody that's going to be able to speak to you, like be
Right.
able to
Right.
draw, you know.
I want to interrupt you here because I
Yeah.
heard you say something and I was
Hmm.
like, wait a second. So you're suggesting that the most important thing about being on a podcast is you getting the assets. What is the difference? Because I want people to
Hmm.
understand this. I give assets to everybody.
Hmm.
Now I have wonderful guests. I have to say that not a lot of guests do share all of the
Hmm.
assets I give
Yeah,
them, but
that's right.
you get the full 30-minute video
Hmm.
file and you get all, the clips and stuff.
Yep.
What is the difference between me as the host sharing that and mentioning you and you getting access to it and then you sharing it? Because what I'm hearing you say is that is what you want to do. You want to get on a podcast so you get that video script and you get to then use it,
Hmm.
right? What are
Yeah.
people missing? What is a disconnect here? Why are my guests or some of my guests not sharing that? What are they missing?
Yeah. Well, sharing when you're on a show, like I'm going to get the assets from this show and I will share it out there with my audiences. That's my audience. My audience would probably like this, I hope, and they would be, they would listen to it, and or grab the clips, whatever. It's good for my audience. Strategically works. But sometimes you're on shows and you just like doesn't fit into my content calendar right now, or maybe you have a backlog and you just don't get to it, or you're just a one person operation and you don't have a social media management. It just things go away, right? For you it's very different because this is your show, so you're out there putting this out there with a method and a madness behind you. Like that's what I do for my show, but my guests don't always share my show either, right? And it's funny because when I started podcasting, I was thinking, I'm going to get this guest and they're going to share the show and then I'm going to get 10,000 listeners. That's not how it works at all, right? Not how it works. But the magic, especially now with AI search, GEO, is in the assets. And here's why. You will get, and this is why I always give the transcripts, by the way, as well. You get the transcript, you get the video, you get the clips. Yes, of course, you want to share your clips and video on your channels, but you also want to put them on your owned properties. You want to get on your website, on your Notion site, whatever it is that you're putting out there in the world. Put these things on, or links to them, on your owned properties. Get the transcript with a little bit of AI magic. Decode the transcript, like write podcasts, blog posts from it. Write LinkedIn posts based on the transcript. These are things that you can do relatively quickly. Now, I would recommend, of course, that you do it with thought and intent, and you make sure that even whatever you're pulling from that transcript is authentically really you and is great quality. But let's put that aside. You have this asset. You put the blog posts that result from the asset on your website. You write a Substack post about it, you put on your Substack. You might even do a mini audio podcast about it yourself and then put that on your website. There's so many different ways to take that content and reimagine it for your own purposes. This is where, your richness of real, useful content, which, as we said, is what AI wants, starts to really come into play. Will you see the benefit tomorrow? No. But imagine you're on 10 podcasts a year, right? And let's say each podcast is 30, 40 minutes. That's almost 10,000 words, probably, that you're going to say between you and the guest or between you and the host.
Yeah.
That is a lot of content. It's a lot of content. And with the tools available today and with an investment of $20 to $40 a month, what you can do at that content is astounding. So suddenly you have, when you are a small operation or a solo operator, you have the capability to really put out important, like point of view stories and content that align with your business without having to pay a huge fee to an agency or to freelancers or to whatever. And I'm not trying to put any of those people out of work. This is additive. This is all additive.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So if you're, and I cannot believe I'm looking at the clock. We're at 30 minutes.
Wow.
So if you like Dan and I have a podcast and you're getting wonderful people on, it is your duty today to start asking to be on their podcast and to start using the assets that you get from the podcast you're on to use it. Now, I just had an aha moment sitting here because I am doing more with the content that I get from guests like you being on my podcast. And I've been meaning to put podcasts that I am on my website, right? That is the next step. I have put it on a Spotify list. I have a Spotify list, all the places that Doreen's been on a podcast. But I realized that last year I was on maybe 3. The previous year was maybe 2. 3 years ago I was on a bunch more. This year, my goal is to be on 12. But I haven't taken that step to take those podcasts and then put them on my website. And then, yes, I'm sharing them, but I'm not sharing them as well as I can. So if there's anything that you guys, when you're listening, when you're watching this, take away from this, use every single piece, every asset that is given to you or that you can ask for, and share shit out of it, right?
Yeah.
Share it everywhere. And that's what's going to make the difference. Wow.
Yeah. And you might be wondering, well, okay, fine, I get a transcript, et cetera. How am I going to deal with this? Like I mentioned, there's tools. Just go out there, start with Notebook LM. Okay. Like everybody who's got Google, you can just do a notebook, get the free one. It doesn't matter. Drop those transcripts into a notebook and start to play, and you will be amazed what you come up with, right? I'm not giving away any secret sauce here. It is really just so powerful. And then, that's how that fuels your quote unquote PR strategy. Those are the kinds of stories, this kind of real points of view that you will be able to kind of build out your owned media, which actually attracts the earned media. You'll be able to be on more podcasts because you'll be able to show, hey, look, I was on a podcast and this is the really great stuff that happened. And it sort of builds on itself. It's like anything else, consistency and time really.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said, it doesn't take as much time as it used to because I have a couple of GPTs that I made for this purpose, right? I have a GPT that says podcast video to blog, and I have it all set up. So I put the transcript in there. I tell them, tell the GPT what I want it to do. And it creates that blog for me. And I'll go back 10 times if I don't like it and say, that is not what I want, or, but it saves a lot of time. So
For sure.
Dan, our time is done. Dan Nestle, where can people find you online? And you and I need to continue this conversation offsite, but this is good stuff.
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, and it's Nestle like Russell. Just look for Daniel Nestle or Dan Nestle. I'm sure you'll find me. You can find me at my website, which is for Inquisitive Communications. That's Be Inquisitive. That's be-inquisitive.com. And on the Instagrams at the Trending Communicator and the Trending Communicator podcast. Look for the Trending Communicator wherever you listen to podcasts, and you'll have me in your ear before you know it.
That's awesome. And I will put all those links in the show notes. So if you're watching this with us live and you want to connect with Dan, go to the show notes. It'll all be in there. So Dan, thank you so much for being with us today and being my guest. Thank you to all of you for watching, podcast listeners, staying all the way to the end. I appreciate you. I'll be back next week with another episode of Strategy Talks. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Doreen.